Hello everyone. We are going to start a chapter for class 10th history, that is the rise of nationalism in Europe. It's the first chapter of your book. So we are going to start with the chapter. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share the channel of Noble Crew Tutors. Here we are going to start with the chapter. So here we can see the picture. It was actually a print drawn by a French artist by the name of Frederick Soreru. He actually dreamt of a world that was democratic and a social republic. What are social republics? They're also known as the workers' states. He wanted the pact between the nations, and this was what the print was called. It was called the pact between the nations. This is that print, and in his first print, he showed the people of Europe and America, men and women of all ages and all social classes, as you can see, very aristocratic people and very, very poor people as well. So, as we remember that in ninth class, we had studied a chapter of French Revolution. And in that, there was a female figure who personified liberty. Same as that, in Europe, there was also a female figure who was the personification of their ideals, their ideas. As we can see here, we can see a cross here and the Charter of Men's Rights here. What's a charter? A charter is a page that consists of all the laws. It consists of all the rights of a man. And further, it is as described in the chapter that we can see that she bears in one hand the torch of enlightenment, that is the cross, and the charter of the rights of man. And on the earth, in the foreground in the frontal view, we can see absolutist symbols. The symbols where power was exercised without any check. And these are the symbols of the monarchy, the papers and all, they're all scattered and torn and tattered. This is what shows the end, according to Frederick Soreru. He was a French artist. It was a utopian vision. What is a utopian vision? He believed in a society that is so ideal, that is unlikely to exist actually. And further we can see that leading the procession are the states of Switzerland and America. Switzerland and America by 1848 were already nation states. What are nation states? Free from any kind of colonization. France was identifiable here. What identifies France here? France is identified by its revolutionary tricolor flag. And following the people of France are the people of Germany with their classic black, red and gold flag. What actually is interesting here is that at that time, Germany was not considered a united state. It was just an expression of liberal hope in 1848. German-speaking people were basically wanting to be constituted into a democratic constitution, and following the German people in the picture are the people of Austria and the Kingdom of Sicily and Lombardy, Poland, Europe, Ireland, Hungary and Russia. You can see it's a very long procession, right? It can go up to beyond, and we can't even imagine that. And from the heavens above, in this picture, from the heavens above, we can see the crucifix of Christ with a cross here, and the angels looking upon from heaven, and the words fraternite, that is fraternity in English and fraternite in French, being displayed in the clouds. So, this was actually the image that Frederick Soreru wanted of the world. It is what he believed for the world. And it was a utopian vision. Something that could never happen. And it was so ideal that it was unlikely to happen. and we'll further study about nation states, what happened because of the European nationalism rise and like multinational dynastic emergence by the empire of Europe. We'll study all these things in the chapter ahead. So, we are going to start with the topic the French Revolution and the idea of a nation. What basically happened was that a clear idea of nationalism that would be free from a monarch or the rule of any absolute power was first brought in by the French Revolution in the 1789. So, as we have already studied in the 9th standard, the French Revolution was an extreme revolution where the people of France got tired and got fed up from the monarchy so much. Monarchy is the king's rule so much that they began to revolt against it and they began to rise, and they wanted France as a nation state that is free from the rule of a monarchy. It became a full-fledged territorial state in 1789, and it was the rule of a absolute monarch. The French Revolution basically led to the sovereignty. Sovereignty is the freedom of the French citizens from the monarch. The revolution basically shaped the nation and its destiny. The French Revolution made France into a new sovereign nation. From the very beginning, the idea that was embedded in the minds of French people by the revolutionaries, by the French revolutionaries, was that of la patrie and la citoyenne, that is, the fatherland and the citizen. It basically emphasized the need for a united community. When you embed the idea that it is your land and you are the citizens in the mind of some people, what happens is that they grow patriotic about the state, and when they grow patriotic, they become a united community because they have united ideals. Equal rights were to be given under the constitution. The French revolutionaries started promising these things, started bringing measures and practices for it. And what happened was a new French flag, the tricolor, that would replace the royal standard flag and would bring the ideals of new France into the minds of French people, was established. The Estates Generals, which was later renamed the National Assembly, was elected by the active citizens of France, and this gave the citizens power to elect their own leaders, and this made them even more patriotic. New hymns were composed. Hymns are songs. Oaths were taken. Martyrs who gave away their lives for the French Revolution, they were commemorated, they were celebrated by the people. A centralized administrative system was formed. Uniform, that is equal laws for all people, was formed, and internal custom duties and dues were abolished. Internal custom duties उस time France पे इसलिए थी, whenever something used to travel even within France, the king, the monarch, used to put some taxes and put some dues on it, which used to increase the cost of the objects. And a uniform system of weights and measures was introduced in France at that time, and regional dialects were basically discouraged, and they encouraged the use of French as a permanent language in France, as it was written and spoken in Paris. Because it was France, everybody spoke French, but there were different dialects. As in India, जब हम बोलते हैं तो कई जगह का different हिंदी में dialect होता है, कईयों का बहुत thick accent होता है, कईयों का बिल्कुल dialect ही different हो जाता है. Accent and dialect are two different things. But as in France, there were different regional dialects, and they were discouraged, and French was encouraged, and it became a common language. So we can definitely say that the French Revolution brought for Europe an idea of nationalism, and it was carried abroad by France, basically as a French nation. So the revolutionaries embedded in the minds of the French people that it was their mission to liberate the people of Europe from monarchy and other forms of oppression, and basically help other people of Europe to become free nations. And these events in France, when they reached different cities of Europe, उन cities के लोगों ने भी revolt करना start कर दिया. They started to revolt. They also began setting up Jacobin clubs as there were in France. And during these activities, जब ये सब हुआ, when revolutionary wars outbreak हुई, तो French armies ने क्या किया? They began carrying the idea of nationalism abroad. Abroad means to further Europe. And Holland, Belgium and Switzerland, and very much part of Italy by the 1790s had French armies in them, helping them to become nation states, free nations. We are going to further get into the chapter deeper, and here we are going to see what effects did Napoleon have on the administrative divisions of various places. So, as France began moving their armies into Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and much of Italy by the 1790s, what really happened was they started establishing their own control. But we can see that a civil code was established in 1804 by Napoleon, and he introduced reforms. He knew that democracy had been destroyed in France by the return of the monarchy, but in the administrative field, he believed that revolutionary principles were rational and efficient. Rational and efficient means they were according to the working of the place. And in the Civil Code of 1804, that is also known as the Napoleonic Code, he basically threw away, he basically got rid of, उसने वो privilege हटा दी that was based on birth. उसने क्या किया? He established equality before the law. उसने right to property secure कर लिया. All the property would be under the control of the government. And this code was basically exported to the regions of French control. And in the Dutch Republic, in Switzerland, in Italy and Germany, Napoleon had simplified these administrative divisions. उसने इनको और simple कर दिया था. He had abolished the feudal system. उसने जो peasants थे वहाँ पे काम करने वाले, उनको जो manorial dues थे, उनके जो debts थे, he had freed them from those debts. He removed the guild restrictions, and transportations and communication were removed. Peasants, artisans and businessmen loved their newfound freedom. But businessmen and small-scale producers very soon begin to realize the goods, the betterment that the uniform law brought for them. Standardized weights and measures basically were good for them. A common national currency would facilitate the movement and exchange of goods and capital from one religion to other under the system of weights and measures. So basically it was a mixed reaction by the local population where France established its rule. Initially, at first, the places like Holland and Switzerland and Brussels, Mainz, Milan and Worms were basically welcoming the French army as harbingers, the bringers, who brought to them liberty. But this initial enthusiasm, जो उनको starting में खुशी थी, ये soon hostility में बदल गई. Hostility, they soon started getting against the French army, as it was clear that the new administrative arrangements did not go hand in hand with their political freedom. France was basically trying to annex them, and they soon understood this. Increased taxations, censorship and forced conscription into the French army. Conscription, they were forced to assign themselves to the French armies, requiring to conquer the rest of the Europe. This basically outweighed the advantages of the administrative changes. No doubt the administrative changes were good to some extent, but they brought along with them much political unfreedom. People would grow politically unfree, they will grow bonded, and they soon realized this. And जब फ्रांस ने टैक्सेशन इंक्रीज करी, सेंसरशिप करनी शुरू कर दी, if anyone was against them, they used to shut them up, and they forced conscription into the French armies. So basically, this is how France put its share in the nationalism of Europe. And now we are going to start with the next part, that is making of the nationalism in Europe. That was based in the mid 18th century. In the mid 18th century, nation states were not there as we know them today. Germany, Italy, and Switzerland, they were divided into kingdom, duchies, and cantons. What basically happened was they were the rulers. They were the autonomous rulers. They had the complete control of the territory. And Eastern and Central Europe was under autocratic monarchies who came by lineage. Within the territories, उन टेरिटरीज के बीच में भी इतना डाइवर्स ग्रुप ऑफ पीपल रहता था कि एक कलेक्टिव आइडेंटिटी या कॉमन कल्चर उन्हें देना बहुत मुश्किल था. वो डिफरेंट लैंग्वेजेस बोलते थे, दे बिलोंग टू डिफरेंट एथनिक ग्रुप्स एट ऑल, लाइक देयर एथनिक ग्रुप्स वर ऑल्सो different from what ethnicity they are, what country they belong to, what lineage they belong to. It was completely different. The Habsburg Empire that ruled over Austria and Hungary saw many different people of many different culture and regions. The Alpine regions, including basically the Royal Australia and Sudetenland, as well as Bohemia, were German speaking people. And Lombardy and Venetia were Italian speaking provinces. Half of Hungary spoke Magyar, and while the other half had different dialects altogether. So Hungary was especially very, very far away. It was far away in the terms of dialects and common culture and common identity. So, in Galicia, aristocracy spoke Polish, that is the language of Poland, and iske ilawa, there was a huge subject of peasants, including the Bohemians and Slovaks to the north, the Slovenes in Craiova, Croats to the south, and Romans to the east, Transylvania. So, itna diverse group in 3 dominant groups ke, that was the Alpine region, the Lombardy and Venetia, and Hungary के अलावा भी there were so many diverse groups of people. So अब question ये है कि जब इनके पास कुछ common identity, common culture ही नहीं है, तो how do you spread the idea of nationalism and the idea of a nation state to emerge from such diverse group of people? So we'll now start discussing how the nationalism was affecting the different classes. First, we are going to discuss the aristocracy and the new middle class. Basically, socially and politically, both socially and politically, the aristocracies was a dominant class. How dominant? They were basically they got rid of taxes. They didn't have to pay taxes. Their life was basically very luxurious, and the members of this class were united by a common cut across the regional division. They owned houses on the countryside and also the town houses. They spoke French for the purposes of diplomacy in the high society. Their families were often connected by the ties of marriage. What happened was aristocracies, the aristocratic, the rich people of those times basically did not marry outside their aristocracy. They married within their caste, thus connecting all of them by the tie of marriage. And this powerful aristocracy was small in number because they didn't have many rich people. The majority of the population was made up by the peasantry, the people who used to bulk the land, and who were small owners who used to do plantation or do petty jobs. But to the west, the bulk of land was farmed by tenants. Those tenants basically were peasants and small owners. They either rented it, or they completely, if they were middle class, they would buy that land. And to the west, this land was owned by small owners, while in the eastern and the central Europe, the pattern of land holding was characterized by the vast estates which were cultivated by the serfs. Who were the serfs? Serfs were the people who were bonded by the feudal system. They basically worked for someone else. In the western parts of the Central Europe, the growth of industrial production and trade also meant the growth of the towns and emergence of social and commercial classes, जिनकी एग्जिस्टेंस बेसिकली किस पे बेस होगी? वो जो मार्केट में प्रोड्यूस होता है उस पे बेस होगी. वो जो प्रोड्यूस होता है, they'll basically industrialize it, they'll basically sell it. Industrialization began in England in the second half of the 18th century. जो 18th century का second half था, उसमें जो इंग्लैंड था, it began its industrialization. Different industries were set up in England. But जो फ्रांस था और जर्मनी के पार्ट्स थे, उसमें ये जो industrialization थी, it began in the 19th century, which was much later than England, making England even more advanced than it already was. इस सब के बीच में ये जब हो रहा था, तो एक न्यू सोशल ग्रुप emerge हुआ. That was a working class population. जो middle class थी, they were basically industrialists, businessmen, professionals, etc. And जो बाकी था Central and Eastern Europe, ये जो groups थे, these groups were very small in number until the late 19th century when the industrialization began. And among these people were educated liberal middle class, liberal who had liberal ideas and thoughts. They had the idea of national unity, and they wanted the abolition of aristocratic privileges, which gained popularity within the middle class itself. So next we have the question, what does liberal nationalism stand for? Basically, Europe by the early 19th century was closely allied. He was closely aligned to the ideology of liberalism. For the new middle class, उनके लिए जो liberalism थी, उसका मतलब था कि freedom एक individual को और law के पास equality, मतलब law के सामने everybody should be considered equal. And politically इसका मतलब था कि government by consent बने. Middle class के लिए this meant that they wanted equality before law and freedom for the individual. Politically it emphasized on the concept of government by consent, that the government by consent of the people. But फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन से लिबरलिज्म का मतलब एक लोगों के दिमाग में क्या बैठ गया था? द एंड ऑफ ऑटोक्रेसी एंड क्लेरिकल privileges, the privileges that were given to the first classes, the aristocratic classes. And 19th century में जो liberals थे, they also stressed on the inviolability of the private property. But still, the equality before law did not necessarily stand for universal suffrage. The right to vote was basically at that time, during France, the French Revolution was given to property owning men, and women and non-property owning men were basically excluded from this completely. But the Napoleonic Code went back to giving the suffrage only to men, and reducing all this suffrage from women. Suffrage here means the right to vote. Throughout the 19th and the early 20th century, women and non-propertied men, they fought for their rights and they demanded equal political rights and the right to vote. But in the economic sphere, liberalism stood for the freedom of market and state-imposed restrictions. These demands were strong during the 19th century from the middle class, who saw this as a tie. They saw this as a burden. Napoleon's administrative measures had created small confederations. It had created 39 states, जिसमें हर एक में अपनी करेंसी थी, अपना सिस्टम ऑफ वेट्स एंड मेजर्स था. अब सोचिए, अगर आपको 39 स्टेट्स के आसपास कुछ लेके जाना है उन 39 स्टेट्स में, तो आपको उनकी करेंसी यूज करनी है, उनका सिस्टम ऑफ वेट एंड मेजर्स यूज करना है. एंड थिंक ऑफ ऑल द टाइम इट वुड टेक. They have now given an example of a merchant who was traveling in 1833 from Hamburg to Nuremberg. They basically tell how he had to pass 11 custom barriers and give 5% duty to each of them. And these conditions, this example is exactly what was viewed as an obstacle. Obstacle means a barrier, something that hinders the growth of basically economic exchanges by the new commercial classes. In 1834, what happened was a custom union or the Zollverein was formed by an initiative of Prussia, जिसमें क्या था, most German states ने join कर लिया था. इस यूनियन ने क्या किया, इसने टैरिफ बैरियर्स को अबॉलिश कर दिया. नंबर ऑफ करेंसीज जो 30 थी उसको 2 पे ले आए. एंड ये जो नेटवर्क था जो फर्दर डेवलप हो रहा था ड्यू टू इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन, द नेटवर्क ऑफ रेलवेज, दे बेसिकली हेल्प्ड इन द ग्रोथ ऑफ द इकोनॉमिक इंटरेस्ट, एंड दे बेसिकली allowed more mobility, it allowed easier travel. We are going to do a new conservatism after the 1815s and the revolutionary ideas in the next video. So kindly stay tuned for the next video and like the video, comment on it, share your views, and if you have any doubts, kindly write that in the comment section. Thank you so much. Subscribe to Noble Crew Tutors.